Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, as I said in another video not so long ago, I've been playing in live bands and doing sound for live bands off and on for 41 years now. And one of the things that I see most consistently that's like a mistake that bands make is playing too loud for a specific venue. So I wanted to talk about that and talk about like why that's important, and then talk about some ways to correct that, and maybe make some things that are, say some things that are instrument specific. So I probably need to make another video about the bigger topic, which is that, every time that you play at for a venue in a live band, whether it's at somebody's bar or you're playing at somebody's private party at their house or whatever, whether you know it or not, you are in a contractual business agreement, and you're there to provide entertainment. Unless somebody is a patron of the arts and they just say, go ahead, do whatever you want, play as loud as you want. And believe me, I love loud music. I actually have hearing loss and need to get some hearing aids after I pay for some teeth stuff because I love loud music. But, unless there's some kind of bizarre patron of the arts and they don't care what happens at their party or their venue, you are there to provide entertainment. You're there to keep people happy, keep people entertained. And if it's a party, they're supposed to be having fun. And if it's a venue, well, they're supposed to be having fun, but you're supposed to like either draw them there or draw them and keep them there, or just keep them there and keep them buying stuff or making them go to the place in the first place. You know what I mean? And so if you're playing at a volume that's just too loud, then you're doing the exact opposite. You're not entertaining the people, you are driving them out. And very often I played with a lot of people, and I'll get the pushback at some point. Well, it's rock and roll. They're going to have to deal with it. And I'm here to tell you that if that's going to be your mentality, you're going to have difficulties for your entire musical career. And and it's kind of a, if I may be so bold, kind of like a 5-year-old attitude you need to get rid of if you want to be playing out live, because you'd like to be playing somewhere and to somebody, right? So that's like one of the big things to remember. And like I have like real world experience. I played with a band where literally, 3 songs in, we got told to take our equipment down and leave and never come back. Played with this other guy recently. I was doing like sub gigs for one band, and we had a gig coming up, and he got an email he shared with the rest of us that in another band that he was in, they were asked repeatedly to turn down at this venue. They didn't, so he was no longer welcome there as part of an act. So that meant like every band he was in, he was now blackballed from playing at that venue. And some of these places talk to each other, so they find out. So this is a real issue. And there's other times where, this guy will come to you at the end of the night and say, listen, nobody could hear their orders. You guys are great. I love the music, but I can't have you back here. So, as far as like, what do you do? Well, first thing, you need to be very, very communicative with the people. You need to constantly, I think, over-ask them, are we too loud? Let me know if there's anything wrong, and let me know sooner rather than later. So I always think, it's my experience that you always need to have that dialogue open and be respectful of the people that are running the place, that are having you there, that are paying you. I hope they're paying you. We should make a video about that and why you shouldn't do this for free. Now, specific things like vocals. This is not something you would think of normally, but I played with a number of vocalists who want their monitors so screaming loud that we've had the club owner walk up to us and tell us that we need to turn the vocals down before you even started. We're doing sound check, and the sound isn't even coming out of the main speakers yet. It's just the monitors are that loud, bouncing off the back walls, or just that loud, sometimes in an open area. And, as I understand how, important it is to be able to hear yourself. Some of that comes down to the stage volume of everything and needing to adjust that so that the singers can hear themselves. And there's some of it in terms of EQ and knowing, what to listen for. There's getting the right monitors, developing the skill of listening in the first place. And there's also developing the skill of being able to play when you can't really hear. And that's something I've had to do over and over and over during my career. I've had plenty of gigs where I can just barely hear what's going on, and I've learned how to do that. So that's a skill that you have to pick up. It's suboptimal, and when I get a great monitor mix from somebody, I'm like, oh, this is wonderful, where I can hear myself. But there are places that you play where it's really, really difficult to hear yourself or to hear the vocals or whatever happens to be. Next one is drums. This one is far more obvious. The drums can absolutely dictate the volume of a band. And I played with a lot of drummers, and the skilled ones know how to play appropriately for the venue. And that means doing things like bringing rods and bringing brushes in case it needs to be softer. A couple times bringing like low volume cymbals, which is less common. I've seen 1 or 2 guys do that. But knowing how to play the kit, and like a really skilled drummer can really pull back. And so that's important. Because that's an instrument that you can get really excited, and the volume tends to go up as the gigs goes on, but you have to, once again, be very communicative. So that can be an issue. And I play with some rabid drummers, which are wonderful, but got to be careful. Guitar, another very, very obvious instrument. And here's one where I need to talk about EQing in general and how to EQ the different instruments. Once again, that's a different video. But, there's a thing with tube guitar amps. And a lot of them they don't make the sound, what Eddie Van Halen called the Brown sound, until you turn the volume up to about 4. And it has to do with the power tubes. It has to do with the power tubes starting to slightly saturate. That's wonderful. So a lot of guitar players are into their sound. And I need to get my sound. The amp doesn't work unless I turn it this loud. Nobody cares. I can appreciate it. I'm an amp and sound and tone connoisseur. But when we're playing it at some place and it's too loud, it's too loud. Sometimes it comes down to bringing the right amp. There are these giant amplifiers that are super loud, the Fender Twins and the Marshall, leads, and they're just not made for places like that. In fact, the Marshall, if you believe some of the stories that Jim Marshall told, part of the whole story behind the Marshall stack was that back in the day when the guitar wasn't going through the PA, Pete Townsend kept on saying back, I need it louder, I need it louder. Well, the guitar's going through the PA now, kids. And we're not in a giant stadium. We're in Fred's bar or your friend Michael's house party. And, you can get the sound with a 7-watt tube amp. And we can stick a microphone in front of it. And there's other times you just need to be mature and turn it down. And, sacrifice the tone for the gig. And there's also modelers we can use and all that kind of stuff, whether you like them or not. There's ways to manage your volume. As far as keyboards, that's a directly electric instrument for the most part. And the thing that I run to the most is the different patches being different volumes. And sometimes they're supposed to be the lead, but sometimes as the keyboard player is switching patches, there's dramatic volume differences. So that's a lot of homework as a keyboard player you need to do, before the gig. And, get things to unity gain or close to unity gain, which, essentially means they all are the same volume. Doesn't matter which patch you use. So that's something to be aware of. Keys I run to less problems with. But that can happen. And usually it's this very abrupt volume change. And sometimes there's another patch where I can't hear you at all. Bass. What could go wrong with bass? We don't need to bring the big giant refrigerator Ampeg SVT amplifiers. The biggest thing with bass that I run into, and because I'm a bass player, is if you're playing with a little amp and it's down by your feet, well, then you don't hear it that well. And so very frequently I will bring 2 cabinets and I'll have one much closer to my head. And it's not, that amp can be frighteningly loud, but has a volume knob. It's just to get to the point where I can hear myself better, where I'm not turning up the volume. They also make a whole bunch of amps and cabinets now that are tilt, and they tilt right at you. So it's kind of pointing towards your head rather than pointing towards your feet. And eventually everyone can hear it anyway because of the nature of bass. But that's something that's important to know, and there's ways around it. And in fact, with any kind of instrument like guitars or basses, one of the biggest tricks is to use some kind of stand where you're getting it closer to your head. You're tilting that guitar amp so it's pointing towards your head. So you're not turning it up screaming loud because now you can hear it. And let's see, I think horns. These can be very loud instruments, and so horn players can use. I run into less problems with them because most of the horn players I play with know how to manage the volume of their instrument, and we'll use some kind of mute if they have to, or usually we're in a position where we're playing at some place where we need to mic them up. But horn players have to be aware because those instruments can be incredibly loud. I recommend, and I love amplifiers. So it kind of kills me to say this, but the more that you can put through the PA, and the more that you can let the sound person handle the volumes of everything, the better. Because very often, well, not very often, all the time, they can hear what it really sounds like out there. They can hear what the volume sounds like in the front of house. They can make the appropriate adjustments. There's nothing more frustrating for me when I'm running sound is to have a venue owner come up to me and say, can you turn them down? And I'm like, yeah, except for that guitar player and the drummer. and I have to communicate with them. And sometimes it's a guitar player and drummer that simply will not turn down. You know, I play, you know, I did sound for another group a while ago, and the guy just used a modeler, which means there's no amplifier. And, you know, he got great tones out of it. He was somebody that really did his homework, and everything was at unity gain. So when he went from patch to patch, you know, it was the same, because that can happen with guitar modelers just as much as keyboards, sometimes even more. And I could just control his volume so well. And I played with another guy off and on who just brings this little teeny amp. You know, we mic it up, we put a lot of it through the monitor so he can hear himself, but I can control it, which is great. And having the appropriate PA for the venue is really, really important. You know, I play with one guy, and he loves these big giant PAs. I do not bring a big giant PA, so sometimes he has somebody else come in. And, you know, sometimes we can play his gigs where it's just shaking this place that it just doesn't need it. It's physically huge, and it's blowing people out of the water. You know, so having the appropriate size equipment, which I'll talk about a little bit more in another video for other reasons, is really, really important. But, you know, being aware of and managing your volume. I mean, I've played plenty of places where it turns out we're playing for a dinner crowd, and our amps are barely working, and the drummer has the brushes out, and we're playing like Zeppelin and Hendrix, and we're dialing it down, and it can be difficult, but it's a valuable skill to have. And it's something that the better you are at doing that, the more marketable you are. And no, I'm not talking about being sellout. I mean, like, I want to be able to play places. And, you know, if I'm getting kicked out of every place, because you start to build up a reputation, you know, one way or the other. If you're getting kicked out of places because you're too loud, or people don't want you in their band because you're too loud, you know, that starts to add up. And for me, the goal is to be able to play out and have fun and do this and make some money and all that kind of stuff. If I'm doing that, if I'm playing too loud, essentially what I'm doing is I'm throwing obstacles in my own way, which is not cool. All right, take it easy, kids. I'll talk to you later. And turn it down, for crying out loud. Don't you boys know any nice songs?